Good afternoon. My name is Tricia Beal. I'm CEO of Farm Journal Foundation. On behalf of our entire team, welcome to our Fall 2022 Speaker Series. Today, we're going to kick off right where we left our conversation in the spring, focusing on the issues of food loss, food waste, and food acceptance. In the spring, we looked at these issues through the lens of research and data. But today, we're going to hear from three amazing organizations who are working at the community level to tangibly advance change. Our moderator today is a wonderful friend of Farm Journal Foundation, Roger Thoreau, who is a world-renowned author and journalist and scholar in residence at Auburn University's Hunger Solutions Institute. To the hundreds of students who are joining us today, both live and through our social media channels, we want to acknowledge your being in attendance, and we're grateful that you're here. We want to hear your voice today and also send our sincere good wishes for a great fall semester. So with that, let's all really participate today. Let's make this a really engaging discussion. You can use our chat feature to engage with one another and with our panelists. And now I'm going to put it in the very good hands of Roger to kick off our discussion. So Roger, take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, Tricia. Welcome back, everybody. From the last several months, the summer vacation, we're all into the swing of a new semester. I'm coming to you from the Hunger Solutions Institute at Auburn University, where I'm a scholar in residence. As the bio says, it's loftier than it actually is, given my background as a journalist. But delighted to be here again. A very warm welcome and enthusiastic welcome, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon or evening or morning, even wherever you may be, for this latest installment of our University Speaker Series. And particularly greetings and a warm welcome to all the students who are joining us today. So again, thank you, Tricia, for the very kind introduction, and to Farm Journal Foundation and Universities Fighting World Hunger, and all the sponsors and partner universities and colleges for making this all possible. Also, hey, Happy International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. That's a long celebratory title. Look, I am not making this up, just to go with our theme today. Yes, this is actually a thing. There is such an occasion, a day proclaimed by the United Nations, raising awareness, raising the clamor, I would say, of food loss and waste and the impact that it has on the human condition and on our planet. So hooray that we have such a day. Every day should be such an awareness day, along with the awareness that hunger and malnutrition continue to abide and persist in our world today. So it's a day to remember how food waste perpetuates hunger, and is one of the leading reasons why hunger and malnutrition and the related diseases persist and abide with us, as I said, still today in 2022. It's remarkable that this still abides and remains with us. And our grand theme throughout this series of panel discussions, basically stretching over the last couple of years, has been building better food systems that nourish, the nexus of agriculture and nutrition. And it's precisely at this nexus where we find our greatest challenge today. How do we both nourish the planet and protect the planet at the same time? How do we meet the relentless demand for more nutritious food coming from an ever-increasing population and an ever more prosperous global population, while also safeguarding our environment and biodiversity? For the very fact of growing food to feed us, to nourish us, takes a toll on our soils, our waters, our air, our climate, our animals, our pollinators, our habitats, pushing us ever closer to our planetary limits. And food waste, wasting food, compounds that challenge, this dilemma. So given the toll that growing food takes on the planet, when we think about all that, we have to ask ourselves, how dare we waste any of this food that's being produced? And yet it is one of the great outrages in our world today that as much as 1/3 or so of all the food grown is either lost at the farm, at the trade, or at the processing stages, or it's just wasted, thrown away at the retail or consumer end. And we'll hear all more about that, about the size and the scope of the problem as we go on here from our assembled experts and people that are on the front lines of this. But just think of this, my goodness, 1/3 of all our food. We think of the consequences on our environment. We're using soil, nutrients, water, for instance, to grow food that's never eaten. The greenhouse gases that are released by discarded, spoiled food. So that impact on our environment, the impact on the availability of food and on food prices, that impact is enormous. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, what's wrong with us? We can do much better than this. And again, our timing to get today, in addition to the International Awareness Day, to discuss this issue, it's even more fortuitous than any other time, more fortuitous even than Food Awareness Day, because our discussion follows yesterday's White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. So it's the first time the White House had convened a summit for 50 plus years. Again, we have to ask, gee, what took so long? What else are we talking about if we're not talking about hunger and nutrition and health? And so, but the White House released a strategy document setting out the way forward to end hunger in America by 2030. Part of that is a commitment to reduce barriers to food recovery. So that strategy, it also mentions that 1/3, it also mentions that says that 1/3 of all food in the US goes uneaten. And it sets as a goal, I'll quote from the document, to prevent food loss and waste across the food supply chain and help ensure safe, good quality food gets to those who need it most. So I'd also like to add and mention that this topic of food waste is at the center of another of our themes of our series that kind of has run through all our panel discussions, that mainly that we all have a role to play in meeting this great imperative to finally end hunger and malnutrition. So no matter what we're studying, no matter where our careers may take us, no matter our skill set or our passion, each and every one of us can make a difference. Certainly ending food loss and waste is something we can all contribute to. After all, we're all responsible for it. It's in our hands. And we can start now on doing something about this. There's no need to wait. And I know many of you students are already at the vanguard and at the forefront of this movement and the things that you're doing. And we'll hear again from some of those activities. And so, yeah, thank you for all the work that everybody is doing on this front. So we'd like this panel to be as interactive as possible. So please use the chat box to let us know where you're from, what you are studying, where you're working. Send us your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And what we've done is to explore the current challenges and examine the models of promise and progress that we've seen on this front and that confronts us. We've assembled a wonderful panel. We can see them all on the screen, featuring 4 individuals who have spent their much of their careers, their lives, even the youngest among us, so involved in this already, at this intersection of food waste, nutrition, the acceptability of food, the appropriateness of food to reduce waste. So joining us are Katie Hart. She'll be our keynote speaker and also a panelist. Katie is the senior operations leader or operations director at ReFed. Katie has worked in food systems, primarily in food waste reduction since 2014. So great experience and great knowledge that we'll be hearing about. We also have with us Aidan Riley, who's the co-founder and head of partnerships at the Farmling Project, a fascinating, marvelous nonprofit that has as its goal of rescuing food surplus from farms and getting it to food banks around the country. So he'll tell us this whole fascinating story, how it started just a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And when they were all students, just like many of you, but know this. So 2 years after founding, 2 years later, the Farmling Project is now closing in on nearly 100 million pounds of food moved across the United States, backed by a full-time staff of 20 people, as well as over 600 young student volunteers. So we'll hear much more about that. We also have with us today Kendra Onorisak, who, Kendra, did I get that right? Excellent. Director of, should have asked Aidan that too, and everybody. So, so thanks, Kendra. Director of Community Outreach and Department of Dietetics and Human Nutrition at the University of Kentucky. Since 2019, Kendra has been working in the DHN and as the Director of Community Outreach. So in her current role, she leads and mentors 40 to 50 or so student leaders at the campus kitchens at the University of Kentucky. She'll tell us more about that. So, and on top of all that, she's currently pursuing a doctoral degree, as if she wasn't busy enough, in education sciences, specializing in health education at the University of Kentucky. And we also have with us today, direct from Loyola University in Chicago, Ridwan Abdul Rashid. He's a freshman at Loyola University. He's affiliated with IFANCA, the Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America. And he'll tell us about, the fascinating work that he and other students in high school, so last year at Sullivan High School in Chicago, not far from Loyola, of their efforts to confront and have a dialogue with Aramark, the food service supplier at high school, to introduce and to finally have access to halal food. And so it's a great example of students raising their voices on this issue. So delighted for everybody to be joining us. So Katie will be leading us off today with our opening keynote address. She'll then follow with our panel discussion. So Katie, take it away.
Thank you so much to Farm Journal Foundation for having us today. Thank you, Roger, for that fantastic introduction. I don't really need to say much. I could probably just sit and listen now. But I'm really excited and delighted to be here to talk about this solvable problem of food waste. So on the next slide, what I really like to start off with, and if you only leave this conversation with one takeaway, it should be that food waste is solvable. And that's it. Food waste is solvable. As Roger was saying, this is an absolutely ridiculous, tremendous problem, but it is solvable. We know a lot about the solutions that are available and being implemented today. I'm personally really excited to hear my peers talk about, what they're doing on the front lines. At ReFed, we work really at the systems level as an enabler of all of the solutions that are out there, big, small, national, local, for-profit, nonprofit. But it's the folks on the front lines and the people that get up every morning and get their hands dirty with this, so to speak, that are taking the strides to achieve the common goal that we're all working towards, which for most of us is cutting food waste in half by 2030. This is a national goal that was adopted by US EPA and USDA in 2015. It's a goal that hundreds of companies around the globe have committed to, and it's even enshrined in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals number 12.3. And that's cutting food waste in half by 2030. And it's something that we're all working towards together. So on this next slide, you'll see what's going to happen when we get there. And I love that you brought this up, Roger. This graph shows the difference between what it's going to take to feed our growing population by 2050, business as usual on the top line, as compared to with a 50% decrease in food loss and waste on the bottom line. There's an estimated 24% reduction, so nearly a quarter of supply needed if we cut food waste in half. Now that is tremendous, and I really can't emphasize that word enough, but as Roger was saying, that relieves pressure on so many of our ecological systems and the inputs required to produce our food, whether that's water, pesticides, fertilizer, land, labor, energy. There's so much that goes into getting that cute little tomato to our salad plates. And if we can relieve some of that pressure, we can save those resources, protect our climate, protect our society better. But also we can look at better ways to use those resources in different, more fruitful productions. So on the next slide, you'll see how we're doing so far. And the story is we have a lot of room to go. Food waste has just about leveled off since 2016, but we have seen an overall growth of about 12% over the past decade. So we are wasting a little bit more, but in the past 4 or 5 years, we are seeing a trend of that starting to level off. On the next slide, it's a bit more of a promising story. Per capita food surplus has actually declined by 2% over the past 5 years. this is really encouraging. And while we do need to accelerate and increase the work that we're doing on this topic, as you'll see, and as you heard briefly about Farmling, there are hundreds of new organizations, new community efforts, new companies starting up to address this problem. And we have seen literally hundreds, nearing the thousands, starting to come online just in the past decade. They're going to accelerate that change for us. And we're talking small organizations, we're talking major companies. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars starting to be invested in this space. So things really are starting to pick up. But the story is that we have more to do. And on the next slide shows how we're going to get there. So I know you can't read every word on this slide, but just as a visual, these are over 75 different solutions that can get us there to food waste. Again, I don't expect you to be able to read all of the words on the slide, but this one is really exciting to me because it really brings home that we have a path forward. There are over 75 solutions, just in ones that ReFed is tracking. We do a lot of work on data and insights in the space, helping others make more informed decision and take more informed action. And what we do with these solutions, specifically with the ones we've been able to model, so the bright green at the top of each column, is we actually calculate and quantify the diversion potential. What type of investment is needed, as well as what type of capital, so philanthropic, private, public capital. We calculate the impact of reducing food waste through the solution. So greenhouse gas emissions reductions, water savings, meal rescued and donated. We also identify the barriers to implementing these solutions, which stakeholders need to take action, whether that's consumers, governments, corporations. And we also identify the policy environment that's going to be needed to help these solutions move forward. The blue solutions in the middle of each vertical, those are unmodeled. So these are really amazing solutions. We just didn't have enough data for them when we put out our insights engine for the first time in February of 2021. And then in the kind of mint green at the bottom of each column, these are best practices. Some of these are solutions and strategies that have been around for decades. You know, ReFed's only been around for about 6-7 years. Many of these strategies predate ReFed. We did not invent these. There are things like employee meals, local food systems. So you could say some of these have been around for hundreds of years. And what's really inspiring to me about looking at this is we have a way to get there, and that there are organizations like Farmling, like Ivanka, that are working towards these solutions and putting them in the hands of people that make decisions every day. On the next slide, something that gets me equally excited is that we know a lot about what we don't know. And that's in terms of the remaining opportunity. So what I want you to pay attention to on this slide is the gray section on each of these vertical bars. You can see it really well on Optimize the Harvest, for instance. That means that we know there's more opportunity to address food waste or food surplus in these areas of solution categories, but they haven't come online yet. This is really exciting for me because that means there's more space for innovation, creative thinking, new ways of doing business, new ways of collaborating, new types of community partnerships. And this is a place where all of us can be part of this solution together to work on these new ideas. You know, like again, Farmling wasn't on the map a couple of years ago, and now they are, just because folks like Aiden recognized there was something they could do about this, and they stood up and did it. This is an opportunity that we all have to tackle. And on the next slide, you'll see the impact we're going to create when we achieve this goal to cut food waste in half by 2030. And as Roger was alluding to in the introduction, there's tremendous value here. And whatever your motivation is for addressing food waste, be it financial, social, environmental, there's kind of something in it for everyone. These are annual impacts, with the exception of jobs created. That is over a 10-year horizon. But just imagine that we can be saving almost $100 billion a year. We're saving trillions of gallons in water. We can be delivering billions of meals to our neighbors in need, as well as creating economic value through jobs and contributing to the economy. So there's a huge amount of value here in what we can do when we cut food waste in half. So what are we up against, really? What's the size of the problem here? When you go to the next slide, you'll see at a global scale, we're as Roger mentioned, we are wasting about 1/3 of all food produced. This costs us about $1 trillion. That's bigger than many countries' economies. That's incredible. It's also generating nearly 1/10 of global greenhouse emissions. Now, again, that is on the scale of countries. The only countries that produce more greenhouse gas emissions are the US and China, and then it's food waste. So just let that sink in. Food waste is bigger than a country in terms of dollar value and greenhouse gas emissions just being thrown out. Meanwhile, we have so many neighbors in need. This is a great opportunity for us to flip the script and do better. Now on the next slide, let's take it down to the United States perspective. We see very similar patterns. About 35% of all food was unsold or uneaten in 2019. That's the most recent year for which we have really good data on. We're working on our next data update to include 2020 and 2021. And you can see from this graph that some of that was pure food waste that went into the landfill, went down the drain. Some of that was recycled, so composting, anaerobic digestion, and a wee little bit of that was donated. That is all opportunity to do better. While recycling food waste is better than landfill, what we really want to do is see none of that being considered waste and going to people who need to eat food, which is all of us. We produce food for humans, not for the ground, not to produce energy. So that's where we need to direct our food. And on the next slide, you can see what this means in terms of dollars in the United States. And while 2% might not seem like a big number, it's an enormous value of our GDP to be throwing away $408 billion. That hits consumers in our pocketbooks, that hits corporations, that hits the government. On an individual or family level, we're seeing folks throwing out and losing about $1,600 a year. That is a tremendous amount of money, especially if someone's living paycheck to paycheck. Now on the next slide, we'll see where food waste occurs. So starting over on the right, for most of us that's reading backwards, the largest contributor to food waste is households. I think Roger alluded to this as well. Us as the consumers, we have a great responsibility for this. Again, that means we can take action and change our habits, change our behaviors. Our next greatest category is consumer-facing business. So retail, restaurants, food service, university settings is also included in that. Then it goes to farms and then to manufacturing in terms of where the most surplus food or food waste is occurring. Now on the next slide, I really want to hone in on that insight that more than half of surplus food is edible. This is a graph of the causes of food waste. And 2/3 of this graph is made up by not harvested, excess, and trimmings and byproducts. In nearly every instance, that food is still edible. Now that means this isn't the corn husk that is probably too fibrous for us to process. It's not the banana peel that some of us might cook into banana bacon, but most of us probably aren't going to eat. This is beautiful blueberries. This is beautiful proteins. This is beautiful grains. This is food that should be getting to people. This is also product that could be upcycled into new ventures and to additional nutritional products. So this is a huge opportunity for us to do better as a society and as communities. So why aren't we doing better? On the next slide, you'll see some of the barriers to addressing food waste. And really what this means is we need to work better at communication, breaking down community and organizational silos, helping folks better understand the motivations of food waste, how it benefits them personally, how it benefits their aspect of society. We also need to have better data transparency and better data sharing and help folks understand where the food waste is happening and how they can make the best informed decisions. So there's a lot that we're up against, but if we go to the next slide, I'd like to bring us back to this. We have so many solutions, you guys, and we have so many solutions that all of us can take advantage of, that all of us can help implement, that we can get creative around. And if you think back to the beginning of what I was talking about, there's still so much of that remaining opportunity to get creative, to innovate, There's so many ideas that I'm sure you guys are just bursting with. I know I'm just kind of scratching ideas down all the time of, what if we did this? What if we shaped our food system in this way? That is there, and there's funding there, there's organizations there. There are so many folks in this community that want those solutions to succeed. And so I'm really excited to hear my peers talk about what they're doing on the front lines and hear how they're implementing some of these solutions with their communities. And just lastly, on the final slide that I have for you today, I want to leave you with a quote from one of the women that I really admire in the world, Jane Goodall, that every single one of us makes an impact on the planet every day. And we get to choose what sort of impact we make. So whether you're shopping in the grocery store, you're planning a meal, hopefully you are planning your meals, that really does make a difference. Or even thinking about, what size portion you're going to order at a restaurant. Think about how that's going to impact your ability to create change for people and planet, through your plates. So thank you so much for having me. Again, I'm really excited to hear what my food waste friends have to say about the work that they're doing. Thank you, Roger.
Hey, thank you, Katie. That was a really powerful presentation. It shows us the scope of this, and also should have us all smacking our heads that what are we doing? What are we doing to ourselves, to our fellow humans, to the planet, right? When we see all this and the impact of all of that. Thank you, and thanks for leaving us with the words of with Jane Goodall, and particularly, and what I had mentioned, and we'll continue to keep hearing through this is we all have an individual, an impact to make. Individuals matter. We all have something to do, particularly on this issue of food waste and food loss. Banana bacon. Thanks for mentioning that. I hadn't heard about that before. You should share the recipe, or is it as simple as frying up the peels? I don't know.
It is pretty simple. You scrape out the stringy bits and then you throw it on the griddle.
Gee, I shall try that. Anyway, Katie, I noticed that, and as we were talking before, that one of your specialties in your work at ReFed and kind of in your career has been working with startups and nonprofits. So I'm just interested, and if you can tell us all, what do you look for in a startup? What kind of sparks your interest? And say that in relation to the Farmling Project and Aiden, because you were one of their early supporters, I think. Yeah. So what are you looking for? What captures your fires your imagination and your inspiration?
Absolutely. And just a little context is as Roger mentioned, one of the roles we play is providing capital to the sector. So when COVID struck, we raised and distributed $3.5 million out for food waste solutions. And we're actually in the process of raising a $20 million catalytic grant fund right now. We'll have our first open call here in about a month or so. But what we really look for at ReFed, and I'm personally aligned with this, is impact in your own words, not just the millions of pounds that you've been able to reduce, or the thousands of tons of greenhouse gases that you've mitigated, but understanding those community stories. A lot of food waste solutions happen at local or community levels because that's where we eat. We don't, eat. A lot of food is imported and travels across the country, but we eat where we live, and we are humans ultimately, and we have human connections to food. So we really like to understand those deep impacts that folks are having. And a lot of that comes through in conversations around equity, around justice and inclusion. And I'm really excited to hear your story, Ridwan, and what you've done in high school. But that's really what we're looking for, is more than the numbers, and how you're creating those true connections with the folks around you.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll get to Ridwan in a minute. I think a great segue for coming from that then is to go to Aiden. And as we said, received initial support kind of early on from ReFed, and Katie, particular interested in the stories, kind of what you have, what you're bringing to this, in addition to the numbers. So please tell us, inspire us all the way that you inspired Katie and ReFed of what your idea was and what you all are doing.
Oh man. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's really an amazing opportunity to be on here with the rest of the panelists. And I'm grateful to be here and share our story. Let me see if I can share my screen, if that's okay. Can everybody see? Okay. We pride ourselves on really great visual decks, and this is not one of them. I made this, and it's pretty ugly, but hopefully we can follow along. So Farmling Project, this is a nonprofit that a small handful of us, myself and a couple other friends, started my junior year of college. This was just over 2 years ago, and our goal is to connect with farms and people up the supply chain who are having to throw out their perishables and get it instead to food banks and to communities around the country. We started this at the onset of the pandemic. It was April in 2020. So I'm sure each of us remember that at that time, there was no good news to go around. I mean, we're living through the beginning of one of the greatest crises that many of us might ever live through. And one of the, I think we had a conversation with one another, my colleague James and myself, and we said, how are we going to, remember how the role that we played during this time? I mean, at the time I was just sitting around, no school, we had been working on documentary projects together, James and I, and all of that got put on hold. So it was pretty much sitting around playing Xbox, and we had this conversation. What are we going to do? We got to do something. And one of the articles that we read early on was about this thing that I'd never heard of, which was how farmers were having to, it was actually this New York Times article we linked right here. It was farmers were having to dump their perishables. I never heard of something like that, especially not, it was photos like this were attached. Like those are all onions that are getting thrown into the ground, and then millions of eggs and gallons of milk getting dumped into the ground. And I couldn't understand why this was happening. And that very same week, I read this article and it piqued our curiosity. I mean, it happened to, see an old friend who worked for a food bank that I grew up volunteering at. And, we had an offhand conversation basically about the fact that they were, strained. It was here in Los Angeles where I live and where I'm from. They'd seen about a 6x increase in the amount of families coming and depending on their food supply. So we thought, we don't know anything about farming. We don't know anything about freight, and we only know a little bit about this rapidly developing situation of food insecurity, as there were mass layoffs around the country, significant job insecurity and intern food insecurity. But we thought, maybe we can connect these problems with one another, and they can help, and therefore help. Around the country, we're seeing the same thing. It wasn't just in Los Angeles. Here's a photo of a line outside a food bank in Texas. I mean, we were seeing literally hour-long, day-long lines, thousands and thousands of cars lining up to get a bag of groceries. And what we learned had existed for a long time before the pandemic, both on the food waste level and on the food insecurity level, was just becoming more visual at the beginning of the pandemic. It was becoming something that was getting onto people's radars. You were seeing thousands of cars lined up, and it was making people think, what is going on there? So the first thing that we did is, we didn't have any experience, and that was honestly a good thing because it opened us up to be able to listen and to learn. We like I said, we did work as documentary filmmakers before this. So whereas we didn't know much, we did know how to call people and ask them questions, what's going wrong, how to cold call people and not be shy and learn. And what we learned was, due to supply chain breakdowns, farmers having to dump their produce, and basically what they needed in order to get that off the farm at the time was basically the logistics and the freight. So what we started doing early on, we'd cold call farmers if they picked up, which most of them didn't at the beginning. We'd say, what do you have? Can we have it? What do you need? They would say a truck. We would raise donations to both rent a U-Haul and drive that to the farm, pay the farmers many times for, so that they could keep their workers employed, or for partial costs of that produce with donations. Then we drive it back to our local food bank. And this was, honestly, I will admit it was stupid at the beginning. Like we should not have been driving a U-Haul with eggs loaded in the back, and I would not recommend it to anyone. But it was a proof of concept that this actually is something that that could work, maybe at a larger scale. We said to each other at the beginning, let's just do one truck. And if we figure that out, let's do a second and then a third. And slowly that started to build, and it started to gain more attention. This visual of people coming together during this time of crisis and in the most scrappy way possible, figuring out how to help one another, began to get some attention. And we got picked up by a couple, both local and some national news networks like Good Morning America. And when that happened, we went from just a group of friends to literally thousands of people. This was the most amazing thing. Thousands of people reaching out to us from around the country saying, hi, I'm a young person like yourself and I want to join in. How can I help? I'm a farmer. I have stuff to donate to you. I have a truck. Can you use my truck bed to get stuff? And we said, you know what? Yes. We started taking on this massive team of volunteers and basically coordinated this, it was mostly young people at the time. We coordinated this this call and logistics center where we were just reaching out to farmers all over the United States and saying, what do you have? What do you need in order for us to get to people who need it? We called a couple of farmers one too many times, and they were like, if you call me again, I'm going to sue you. But we were determined. We were determined to make an impact. And within 3 weeks, we had moved 1 million pounds of food that was going to get dumped into food banks across the country. That added into this sort of level of attention that both the issues and then us were receiving, which allowed us to connect with people like Refed, who was as mentioned, as our first grant. I remember filing that grant on my phone, and then one night I've never done a grant proposal, and I did it on my phone, and I spoke from the heart. I spoke very truly, but our fiscal sponsor at the time, we were working with another organization. She called me the next morning, 7 a.m. and she's like, what did you do? That's not how you word a grant proposal. And I was just like, I'm sorry. But thankfully they said yes, and have been an amazing partner since. And just that little amount of capital was able to take us from, driving U-Hauls to being able to rent trucks and go greater distances and get food from the farm, let's say in Oregon, down to a community in California that wasn't receiving those onions or whatever type of produce is grown in that area. Today, we do much of the same thing. We are a full-time team. We've had 600 young people come through our organization, volunteering 30, 40 hours a week on top of school, on top of part-time jobs, in order to help call farmers, coordinate deliveries, feed people they're never going to meet, most likely. As well as now we have a full-time team of 20 people from, many of whom were mentors who we called to learn from in the beginning, have now joined the team to help expand this impact. Here are our metrics. We're closing in on 100 million pounds of food moved. We're now, that this number is inaccurate, we're now at about 85, a little bit over 85. But Katie brought up a really great point, which is that the whole thing here is not about the numbers or the whereas it's a nice affirmation that what we're doing is working logistically. It is not a good indicator of really the impact that you're having. So to frame, when we scale like this, to frame that in a context, our mindset, which is influenced by the way that we started, is that there are cultural and community aspects to food security that are of paramount importance if you really want to have an impact. And we are never going to be able to replicate or guess or learn even what those cultural importances are for communities around the United States, as well as we're not going to be able to learn that as well as the community organizations who have been there for, let's say, 2 decades before us. So what we do now, and what we have done, is we talk to, let's say, that community center or that food bank in Watts, Los Angeles, who the community trusts them and they depend on them. And we say, what do you guys need? What is your greatest need? Is it more produce? Is it, just food in general so you can free up some of your budget for things like cold storage or maybe more freight? Do you need a truck? And by aiding them, we're going to be able to create, change through these trusted avenues. And that's where a good chunk of the pride in this impact comes from. And that's kind of touching on, of course, the three pillars that we look at in our day-to-day focus. And the first being activating that community aspect, learning and not trying to reinvent the wheel or think that you can do something better than someone who has been doing it for 30 years, but rather figuring out what their headaches are and seeing how you can help plug in and help them, and sometimes with innovative solutions. Recognizing that each community is different and that there is a network of food charity in the United States that exists, and oftentimes who needs the most assistance are the communities outside of that network. The ones that are hard to reach, the ones that, the ones that are in food deserts, as we call them. We're talking like indigenous populations. A partner of ours, Navajo Nation, who we send to, they're not even within an hour drive of their nearest grocery store. So us getting them a truck of fresh produce is going to have a significant impact on people's wallets. And then, of course, moving the right kinds of food. We began to understand that, like, if you're just thinking that a bag of potatoes is going to help someone because they can eat it, that's not the way to think about this. If you're sending kale into a community that culturally doesn't use kale, or let's say the education isn't there, or people are it's too expensive in that region and people aren't buying it, it's not going to get used. So you have to understand what kind of food you're sending and the way in which you send it, so that, number one, the organizations there have the capacity to take it, and it's not overwhelming their system and their storage. And number two, that the people are going to be able to know what to do with it. And that's a greater sort of challenge of education and accessibility, I'm sure we're going to get into later. The second aspect, which was heavily touched on by Katie, is the relationship to climate and sustainability. Here's actually the statistic. Here's our little graph for the statistic Katie mentioned, which we got from ReFed, which is that if food loss for a country would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, behind the US and China. The reason that we, aside from the impact, the reason that we like to relate this back is because, it's feeding the idea that you don't need to be on this conference in order to care about food waste. The issue of our global health and the health of our environment reaches everybody. And it is such a hot topic now, and will continue to be into the future. It's motivating for so many people. And we're trying to come back and say, this is a way that you can have tangible impact, and understand that by working with these organizations, by creating new innovative solutions, you're going to be able to see the impact you have on the environment through reducing waste, feeding people, and thereby helping the environment as well. We think that sounds pretty good, and that's how we try to appeal to a wider audience. Which brings into the third point, systemic change. We're really talking about the cultural aspect here. We got a donated billboard a couple years ago in Times Square, and it's important to us to get in front of as many eyeballs as possible. Because growing up, not even growing up, 2.5 years ago, I didn't know about the fact that farmers were having to throw out food. I think many of us didn't know the scale in which we were having to do that we were throwing out a third of the food that we've grown, that we can feed every person in the world like twice over, but yet still we have significant hunger, not only in the United States, but around the US. So bringing this problem in front of people's eyes through various strategies, both, getting through on the media, as well as getting to coming to, of course, conferences like this one, as well as, the White House Conference on Hunger that occurred yesterday, is immensely important to us, because we want to make this something that's not a household issue that people are aware of, but a solution that they're aware that they can play a role in solving. And then lastly, that plays in to what I would say is, if FarmLink has any sort of unique role we play in the sense of in the food rescue space, it's that we really hone in our ability to bring in young people into the space, just by nature of the fact that we began this with so many college students who are really responsible for elevating this to the impact we're having now. We have a core belief that if we're bringing someone in, and just for a 6-month, fellowship is what we call it, if that's enough to move the needle of their focus, that they decide they might want to go into the food rescue space, they might want to go work for ReFed or whatever it may be in the future, as opposed to going into consulting, going into, restaurant, whatever, then that impact that these young people are going to have in the 20, 30-year career that follows out after that is 100 times, 1,000 times greater than what we can do today. So we really try to invest in that long-term impact of attracting not just young people, but just people who believe they can make a difference into this space, and because of what it's going to mean for our country and our world down the line. And that is it. Again, thank you guys for having me here today, and I'm excited to hopefully answer any questions that we follow up with.
Hey, thank you, Aiden. That was great. Again, so powerful and impactful. Your last point, at least, about, empowering young change makers and inspiring. Sitting next to me off screen is Lauren Shepard, who's the head of Universities Fighting World Hunger here on the Auburn campus, and she's nodding her head like crazy at some of the things that you were saying. So yeah, deeply impactful here, and I'm sure to many of the students that are also, and everybody else who's kind of on this call, and all those that will watch it then in their classes and everything else that as Farm Journal Foundation spreads to her. Also great that you mentioned the media a couple of times as a longtime journalist. Thank you for that. Not only for spreading the word, but for the initial inspiration. Because so many times we write stories, it's like, anybody paying attention to this? And then there you are reading the stories in the Times, and whatever. I'm hoping my stories in the Wall Street Journal would move the needle or wake up some people on some things. And so, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Again, gets back to we all have a role to play. Anybody studying journalism out there, we raise the clamor, we can outrage, we can inspire. So continue with that. So now we'll go to Kendra. And speaking of Universities Fighting World Hunger, I should have also mentioned that she advises the chapter at Kentucky. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, the campus kitchens. I was over at the operation at Auburn the other day. They were having a hunger banquet. Them and a number of others in the Beat Bama food drive competition. And Campus Kitchens was also speaking there and saw their facilities here. And it's amazing the work that you do on campus. So if you can talk a little about that and kind of the things that you're into.
Yes, certainly. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel, and Aiden and Katie, the amazing stories and amazing numbers. And it's so much to learn from each other. So thank you for sharing that. So now I am just going to share some slides very quick. Aiden, when you say that your slides are not on par, I think mine is probably gonna be one of those worst ones. So there's that. So don't feel bad. Mine is a very plain blank white space. Anyway, can you all see my screen? Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna quickly go over. Sometimes, pictures and stuff can say a lot more. Oh no, let me just swap this. Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I am originally from Burma, near China and Thailand, and I came to the United States as an international student in 2014, not knowing anybody at all, just took on this adventure to come over here with the support of my parents. So when I came here as a dietetic student, and before that I was in Singapore and Malaysia, studying abroad. And when I came here, food is something I love, and I, obviously that's how I majored in dietetics and nutrition, but I started to see how much of food waste is an issue. And that was mind-boggling to me, with Burma being a third world country. We have seen food insecurity in that country and how it looks like, but food waste, not so much, right? And it's just something that it's part of our culture, that my mom always say, like, finish your food on the plate and never take more than this, or the serving sizes that we get in Burma are nothing like what we get in the US. So it's just very mind-boggling to hear and learn about that. And in 2014, Campus Kitchen at UK was starting to get founded, and I was lucky and honored to be a student founding member of Campus Kitchen when I first came here as a freshman and sophomore. And so ever since then, we pretty much started going to Washington, D.C. for the boot camp for Campus Kitchen, getting to see all these other Campus Kitchens, obviously Auburn, Wake Forest, the amazing other Campus Kitchen chapters, and learning from that and being a part of that really ignite that passion. And then ever since then, I never really left from Campus Kitchen. And Campus Kitchen pretty much became my second home, because when I came here, that's what got me out of my shell or my apartment where I don't know how to interact with others. It's a culture shock. It is one of the worst snowstorms apparently in that time. And I was stuck in Chicago for 4 days before coming to Lexington, Kentucky. So with all of that, Campus Kitchen pretty much brought me out to where I feel like I can belong and I can have a voice and I can be with other people who are like-minded. And I think that pretty much drives the foundation of pretty much Campus Kitchen here at UK. Here's just a link, and on the left side is a picture of when we were at Universities Fighting World Hunger and Campus Kitchen kind of combined together summit that we had from, I can't remember, years ago. And with the idea of trash hunger, not food, and that has been still the foundation of what we are pretty much driving on. We were the 41st Campus Kitchens across the nation. Later on in 2019, Campus Kitchen overall, as the Campus Kitchen project did dissolve nationally, but we stayed as our standalone Campus Kitchen, along with a bunch of other Campus Kitchens that we still have a regional network for. Then later we partnered with God's Pantry Food Bank within the Feeding America network as a soup kitchen that is a students organization, but also a soup kitchen on the site, and it is all run by student volunteers and leaders and overseen by dietetics and nutrition faculty and staff like myself and another faculty, Dr. Tammy Stevenson. So our model is pretty straightforward and definitely nothing like what Aiden or Katie has talked about with millions of pounds of stuff, but at the same time thinking about, right, like the local and community, right, like it happens in these local communities and how we can all play a role in that. And so with that, that's kind of how we do with our model. We recover the food before they get wasted, transform those into meals. That's one of the unique parts of Campus Kitchen that I think a lot of our Campus Kitchens take pride in as well, is just really thinking about how can we upscale and upcycle and transform it into healthier meals in addition to the food recovered, and then delivering and serving. But another piece that, at our Campus Kitchen that we really try to strive for is targeting root causes and community empowerment, because we all know food alone is a short-term fix and a solution. And food waste definitely needs to be reduced, but at the same time thinking about how can we do it sustainably, equitably, and culturally appropriate ways. And it's something that we all need to continue improving and strive for. So that's part of our efforts. Obviously, you have heard of these stories that Aiden have mentioned with students being a part of the change makers. And I think this is very, similar, but again, on probably a smaller subscale in that sense of going out to different locations like Farmers Market, Kroger through God's Pantry Partnership, Whole Foods through Glen, Kentucky that we partner with, Research Farm, dining facilities, campus retails, Trader Joe's, a lot of these amazing partners that we get to go and get the food from. And our biggest and newest partnership is University of Kentucky Healthcare Hospitals. So right now we're getting into hospitals and then recovering patient foods and retail and all of that as well, and exploring the healthcare to community aspects of things. And as part of that, like I mentioned, that transforming meals is something that Campus Kitchen is housed in that Department of Dietetics, and we're the academic unit, which is kind of different from some of these other models in the sense that it might be housed in certain like Office of Sustainability or things like that. So we are very driven in that student learning, and obviously we have a lot of dietetics and nutrition students who are already learning on that, but we also have all these students that are coming and transitioning into college and not knowing how to wash produce, or what does it mean to boil rice, or things like that. And so it's a lot about that learning process that goes as part of the cooking process. And so obviously we're preparing these meals to send it out to the community, but also how do we turn this into edible, food safe, culturally appropriate meals is something that they are challenged with, because we don't know. And I mean, that's one of the things with food recovery that Katie and Aiden has mentioned. And part of these challenges is like, we don't know what food we're getting, how much we're getting, and you just have to make it work. And because obviously we're all driven to solve this food waste problem, we don't want to go to waste, and really thinking about how can we put that food out there in a way that is going to be, again, I always say edible and food safe, is some of those challenges we always have to do. So this is where Campus Kitchen students will come together, learn. They normally, whenever we have food recover, we don't know in advance. So they have like maybe 10, 15 minutes to brainstorm and come up with a recipe. We always have protein, a grain, and fruit, vegetables, always as part of our meals. And yeah, they have to kind of figure it out with what we have and then send it out there. And our shifts, cooking shifts, are normally 2 hours. And sometimes we're making 25, 50, 100 meals in that 2 hours time frame. So definitely a hectic process over there. The picture on the right is showing, she's actually a staff member who actually served as our student shift captain or leader. We have a lot of student shift captains, but she came in as a staff member, and she will come in an hour early just to kind of serve on our aspects of things. So that has been very encouraging to involve faculty and staff as part of this, all of that process. And as I've mentioned over there, with students coming together, they learn, those socialize, they apply skills. I truly believe that cooking and meal planning and all of these are a fundamental life skill that all of us, because we all eat and we all should have that skill developed. And so that's some way that students get to turn those random ingredients to some meals together afterwards. And then after the deliver meals, these are during the COVID time, even though the university pretty much shut down, the students never really stopped. So we pretty much went out there and did all those meals and food recovery. And we always send out hot meals to our meal recipients. And that's something that we always want to send it out to them, because some of these people who get our meals, that's the only meal that they eat in that day. And they also don't have any resource to cook or prepare. And some of them are homeless, and most of them don't even have a kitchen space. And so really thinking about that and how can we make that nutritionally well balanced, that they can sustain at least even with that one meal that they might get that day. So we go out to seniors, lower income subsidized housing. We go to homeless shelter, Clissus House, which is for women going through drug rehab and the daycare. Farm to Fork and UK dorms are our campus college food insecurity efforts that we are doing every week, and Ronald McDonald House and so forth. Obviously, none of that will be happening without partnerships and supporting local that we have. So local food systems is definitely one of the key that drive all of our partnerships as well, and community. But going beyond the meal, like I mentioned, is very, very critical for us. So we will do a lot of demos and classes discussing food policies in a lot of different levels, states, legislatures, and nationally and federal government, game nights to play and engage and do these community building with others, weighing the waste at a lot of these campus dinings and stuff to talk about. And the students hate when we weigh their plate waste, because they're like, why are you taking my plate? Like, what are you going to do with this? And they feel very ashamed, I think, a little bit, or embarrassed that they have all the food and that we're putting into the weight. And so they were like, well, give me a second, let me finish the rest of my food and then I'll come back. Anyway, that's one of those things. And then gardening is another aspect, local food system. I do a lot of work in farm to school aspects as well with Campus Kitchen and getting into that farm aspects. But as part of sustainability, we really need to think about that social inclusion pillar, right? Like empowering communities. So not just environmental and the economic aspects of food waste, but also the social aspects of things. And how can we give these marginalized communities a voice and through these equity and equality lens? And how can we encourage and empower students to be change makers makers. And that's something that, we always try to strive for. And the Farm to Fork is one of those that we do to build community on every week and bringing students together. We eat together, we share resources, and we talk about brainstorm solutions and things that we can have effect on, contribute to food waste reductions and food insecurity. People will dine in or bring to go, and these are some example meals that we will send out. Whenever we do, we will use compostable meals, compostable to-go boxes, and all these utensils, because in terms of thinking about food waste, we also cannot forget about how do we deliver these food and what are these items. And so thinking about compostable options, not only for in terms of food, but also for other things that we're transporting them with or carrying them with, is also another really key that we need to always think about. And obviously some of the students who talked about with our efforts is that, it gives me an opportunity to have a substantial lunch for once, or I learned about kindness, or it gives me a sense of equality. Nobody asked me why I needed that lunch. So that's another aspect, is that a lot of entities that are providing food have to go through a lot of referral systems. There's a lot of that paperwork in the process, and people who are homeless or don't have a home or don't have things to have delivered to, or a physical address. There are a lot of challenges that they have to go through just to get that food assistance. Weekends are something that they normally don't get a lot of food assistance for, and they go hungry during weekends. So just thinking about those and that a sense of equality, where we should be able to give these meals regardless of who they are and what their background is, and everybody deserves this healthy meal and a lunch or dinner, is something that we can always think about and ways to improve. So as part of this, in my role, being in that academic unit, we always involve students in the certificate of food systems and hunger studies, doing these practicum hours of service learning, civic engagement. These are always another aspect, along with student research, right? And so teaching students how to not only showing this is a problem, but actually how to systematically address these issues and develop surveys or develop these study designs, and how can they collect these data, how can they involve people who are actually directly impacted and involving their voices as part of the solutions. And all of that is some of these efforts that we always try to look into and strive for as well. And some of these unique collaborations like interior design and looking into how to make a dining locations and the space that we have, and improving it in a way that it is promoting discussions and welcoming environment, so people feel belong and part of this less stigmatized place to come and ask for food. Just kind of things like that is, there are, regardless of your majors, any students out there, that's one thing that I really want to mention, is that, there is a role for you in food systems, whether it is interior design, journalism, nutrition, dietetics, engineering. We're working with engineering students to look at our data reporting system and how can we improve that to make it more efficient and without going through so many buttons to come up with a report, just kind of things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can contribute to with food waste reduction efforts and food insecurity efforts. So with that, I'm just going to conclude, and thank you for having me. And Roger, if there's any other questions with my comments and stuff, let me know. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendra. That was fascinating, and everything that you do. There is indeed a question specifically for you in the chat if you want to kind of see that and answer. They're wondering where you get all the ingredients for the meals that you put together if they're not part of kind of the food that you're gathering up. So thanks for that. And then we'll have another round of questions that we can deal with some of this. So now we're on to Ridwan, and so last but certainly not least, and this has all been building up to your experience, Ridwan. We've heard kind of everybody had mentioned the importance of the cultural acceptability of foods, the equality, the equity issues, which you also raised in your experience in high school. And you can tell us what you're doing now at Loyola, or what your plans are, and if any of this inspires you as well. But yeah, so Ridwan, please tell us about kind of the fascinating work and questions that you raised at your high school, Sullivan High School, with your fellow students. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you for sharing all your story. I'm inspired by all 3 stories. Let me share my screen and give me 1 minute. Oh, hold up. I have to do all this again through like. Give me 1 minute. I will rejoin again because it's like the Zoom make me like do a safety thing.
Right.
Okay, then you could bring it up, but all right.
Yeah, can Maddie bring it up?
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, Maddie, if you can, there you go.
All right, so that's my slide. Like as of in Sullivan High School, we have like Student Voice Council, which will like it was like 10, 15 student, I guess. In SBC, we as a short term, we just say SBC, is we're working for Halal Food. So my freshman year, I was just freshly joining the SBC, and then I didn't know anything because I was like, okay, I'm freshman, I'm just figuring things high school's out. And then COVID hit. My sophomore and junior years, I was remote, and then senior year back, I went back to schools, and then I was like, I talked to the leader of the SBC, like the Mr. Zapata. His name is Joshua Zapata. I was like, hey, like we don't have halal food, like come on. And then he was like, okay, that's a good project that you could work on, like that's something that you could change. And then yeah, and then I started working on it. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what is halal? Basically, we kind of defined it to Aramark because we have like Aramark gonna be like, oh, what is halal and everything. So we kind of basically say that halal in Islamic law is basically what translates to permissible. Is another word of saying what Muslim can do, while haram means unlawful or prohibited. Halal food is food that is permissible for Muslim to eat because they have met the requirement under Islamic law. Basically, we have to slaughter it in a specific way for us to eat it, like that kind of meat. And next, please. Is this the halal important? We're just going to the things. Many Muslims cannot eat like food, like from McDonald's or anything. We can't just get like a free food, or at school in cafeteria, there's burgers and everything. We can't just eat that because we have all this requirement that it has to meet, like same thing as kosher for Jewish faith. You know, they have to meet all this requirement. So it's the same thing for Muslims. Yes, next, please. Sullivan High School is a big Muslim student, or in Sullivan High School, like around the area, we have like approximately 15% of students in Sullivan. And then it was never served halal food. Everything we got was like burger, like nothing that like specific requirement for Muslim student that can eat. And we're just like, here, we don't have any food to eat. So it's like, I raised the questions to like the SVC, and then they was like, oh, let's work on it. So we kind of put the slides like together and then present it to Aramark. Next, please. We did send out a survey like for the Muslims kid. I made up the survey. I was like, how important is halal to you guys? And there's more questions. It's like 87.9%, about 88% say it was very important for them. So it's like, for us, it's very important. Yeah, next. Do you bring food from home or buy lunch at school? Personally, I buy lunch at school because of like, there's no one that could make me food, and I'm too lazy to get up in the morning and make food. So I was like, why not? Like, I tell my teacher, I was like, hey, can you buy me food? Like, not buy me food, I will pay you, but like, can you order me food? Because student cannot do that. And she was like, yeah, but some student from low income family, they be like, it's hard for them because all they got is the food stamps and like all this benefit from it. And then, but the family is like having a bunch of family and they have to cook and all that. So it's hard for some students. And then I was like, this is not fair for us. Like we need to solve this problem, you know? Next, please. And then seven student, like, do you bring food? It's the same questions as the other one, but like 76% say yes, and 24% include like a couple of my other maids, like we buy food from school. Next, please. When I'm at school, I feel hungry because like I can't eat anything. Like from 8 a.m. to like 3:15 p.m. Like there's no food. Like all we get is like water other for us to eat. So it's like even the snacks we can eat in class is because like, hey, like there's rules saying that you can eat snacks or anything like that in class. So it's like it's kind of hard for us to pay attention in class and everything, like for us to participate, you know. Next. And then that's kind of where we kind of research of what happened when we don't have food. And then food insecurity, we said, is defined as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household life and active, healthy life. But feedingamerica.com indicates that we basically look it up for Airmark. It was saying insecure people are most likely to have chronic disease like diabetes and high blood pressure. Next, please. And then how being hungry can affect our educations. Like I'm unable to focus. I was always tired and just putting my head and have my hoodie on and then not paying attention in class. And then I have no energy to participate in like extracurricular. Next, please. And then that's one of our model, which one of my best friend, his name is Osman. And then I was like, hey, can I use you as an example? Because he don't come to school. And then I was like, I even interviewed him. I was like, why don't you come to school? He was like, why should I come to school? I feel hungry. I'm starving. Like, I'm not learning anything in school. So it's like, what's the reason for me to come here then? Then I was like, you're right. Like, we should talk about this and we should work on this. And then I asked him, I was like, hey, can I use you as a model for us since you don't come to school and it's a good fit for us to show proof of it? And it was like, yeah, fine. Like for anything for us, like it worked, you know? So that's one of our model. Next, please. And then Airmark said that I highlighted, there was like what mattered most for us is like our success is reliant on our ability to make a positive impact on the world, environmentally, economically, and socially. We're committed to enabling well-being and equity for both our people and every person we serve. We support our partners, fuel vibrant communities, and we're driven to make a positive impact on the planet. And then I dropped the questions for them in the next slide, which I said, is it equitable to deprive Muslim students of access to halal food? Because there's no halal food for us. And then I have a thing that the Airmark, because we set up an appointment and presented to them, they said that it was the best power presentation that they saw. One of the best, like student put it on. So it's like kind of compliment for us and we did it good. And CPS, Sullivan High School was the first CPS and I was the first one who bring this up and we have halal food now. So even though I couldn't enjoy the halal food, my next generation, my brothers and sisters in Sullivan, they could enjoy it, you know? At least I did something for my community. So yeah. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Ridwan, for all of that. And that's what particularly impressed me, that you kind of said, hey, here's what you're presenting to the world about what you do. Aramark as one of the, not only the supplier to the Chicago public school system and to Sullivan, but one of the largest suppliers to food suppliers in the country, particularly the schools. And it was like, well, here's what you're saying, but well, what about us, right? So that whole issue of equity. And so what you've introduced, this whole notion of acceptability of food that leads into the whole issues of hunger and malnutrition in this country and why it continues to abide, and how it feeds into food waste. That, well, if they're expecting all these 100 students or so that are we're cooking food for them in the cafeteria, but they can't eat our food, right? So adds to the overproduction and the food that's then going to be wasted. So that A for acceptability then adds to the other A's of availability, accessibility, affordability of food, that all contribute to this food waste problem. And then there's the cultural, the religious, the physical acceptability of food. So yeah, great that you were able to raise that. So how did you and the other students feel about this? I mean, you said a little bit, okay, so yeah, this, hopefully it's something not only for yourself and your fellow students, but for future students in the school and future generations. Did it all inspire you to say, hey, we can do something? It matters when we raise our voices.
So first I was like, I'm just a immigrant kid, a refugee kid, which I don't speak English. I can't do anything to change the world. Like I can't and then I started talking to I started joining these clubs and everything, like SVC, which is Student Voice Council. Like I was standing for some of the voice in my school. And then I was talking to Mr. Zapata. He was like our leaders, but he was a social worker. And he was like, I even talked to him. I was like, hey, we are tired, but you guys are complaining that we don't pay attention in class. Like, do you know what's the reason for us not paying attention in class? And it was like, why? I was like, because we don't have energy to be focusing in class. And then he was like, you're right. But I was like, what can we do to change that? If you guys can help with that, And then he was like, yeah, we should work on that. And then I kind of did most of the research and everything with one of my mates. His name is Josefa, with some other friends in SVC. And then he was like, you guys do that, just go to the points and everything so they don't have questions. The Airmark doesn't have questions for you guys. And then we kind of covered everything so the Airmark couldn't ask us anything about it. And then we kind of scheduled it with the head of quarter from Airmark. And then they came into CPS. We have the CPS headquarters, I don't know her name, but the food thing that she handled with. And then she was like, you guys are right. We're doing something wrong here. And then since then, we have halal food, after 2 months, I guess, we have halal food served. But the third thing, the other thing that we asked was hey, we're not sure if it's halal or not, because we need the third party to be for sure checking it if it's halal. And then they did it, so it was halal. So I was proud of myself that I could do something and change, impacted something and kind of inspired somebody else,
Yeah, no, that's great. And to hear that, and that authentication or certification then is really important. That, well, how do we know that this is halal food? This is what you're telling us. So to have kind of the certification there, so it's the confidence for the students and anybody else who would be eating there. So thanks for all that. So we can see how everybody's projects and what you're working on all fits together on this, and hopefully this mighty movement that's looking at these issues of food waste acceptability. So we had a list of questions that a lot of people, as they were registering, sent questions in. And I was just going through, and I think we answered and addressed many of them. So one of them, just picking up on what many of you said and coming from Widron's story. So how can we work to reduce food waste by increasing this food inclusivity and decreasing the stigmatization that then comes from, and that so many, Kendra, you must see that on campus as well. Refed, it's probably in your statistics on kind of the inclusivity. And so kind of any thoughts on that, how stigmatization, how people feeling excluded from the food system just adds to the food waste problem. So anybody who wants to go, just shout in.
I'm happy to start, and really I'm going to point to two examples that Ada and Kendra gave in the work that they're doing, and even with Ridwan, we have to talk to each other. And we have to be, even if we're not the person that's feeling stigmatized, we have to be willing to and understand that other people might be feeling that way and go the extra mile for them or on their behalf. I loved what you said, Kendra, about community empowerment, and that you do things like game nights, building that community and having those cultural connections is so big. Food is so precious to us. And the culture that we've built in our families and our communities. And so going that extra mile when we're working in this space, having those conversations and taking the moment, kind of you pushed your teacher into it, Ridwan, of saying, do you know why we're hungry? And forcing people to ask those questions. It just takes having a conversation and being willing to actively listen. And then do something about it, or do something with those people.
Anybody else? Kendra?
I can speak on a little bit, particularly on campus, when students transition into college, there are a number of students when they start experiencing challenges with food, they don't want to recognize that or say, accept that they are challenging. It is challenging for them and they're having these issues and stuff like that because they don't want to be labeled as food insecure. And food insecurity has such a negative connotation, and it tends to have this victim blaming concept instead of blaming the system. And so obviously the food system itself, and Katie and Aiden has talked a lot about that as well. And Ridwan also explained about, overall, it's just not getting to people. It is not, there is food production, but like there's a lot of issues with that, but people don't think about that. And we tend to think about blaming ourselves when you are the one who is incapable of putting food on your own table. But then in the end, it's not because of your situation that you are in. And so really trying to help people understand that and telling them that we are all part of this. We are all food citizens. We all have a right to this. We all should have a voice out, like, how Ridwan voice out, and everybody should be talking about that and also not blaming yourself. And I think that's one of those things that we really have to kind of like raise awareness in that sense. Another thing is to make it more equitable and accessible in that way that welcomes everybody, and like try to think about even the messaging. So like when we were starting our Farm to Fork, there are a lot of entities on campus that will say like, oh, are you hungry? Come and eat. But instead of like, or like, do you need food? Or are you having issues with food? Those things can really turn off some of those students who are experiencing these challenges because they don't want to admit to it. And so really kind of making like, you have no time or no lunch and you didn't bring lunch, just come on, drop by. Just making it more casual, more open to anybody, that kind of thing is one way to start. Is that by all means the only way? No, I mean, there's so many ways, but I think that's probably one of those ways that equality might be something that most people might be open to, because then they are like, well, I may have money, or like we will invite like faculty and staff regardless of how much they make, along with students who are over there. So it's just bridging that community, and instead of naming like this program is only attended by food insecure people, or this food bank is only for food insecure folks. So that might be one way that we can kind of get started.
Good points. Thank you. I wanted to, and Kendra, the point that you're making, and this has been, I think, such a problem, particularly in our country in the past, that people would look to people that might be at food pantries, or on SNAP or WIC programs, or asking on campus, well, so what's available or something, that we would look at them and say, well, what did they do wrong, right? Or somehow it's their fault. If we've learned anything during the pandemic, it's not their fault, right? Things happen, right? And we have to acknowledge that, in this country, there's so much of that. And so, that acknowledgement and that perspective, I think, is really important. So thanks for raising that. One thing that we do before we're coming up on our time here, in all our past series of panels, we always have a final question for our panelists. So I pose this to you, and this is so addressing Ridwan, your fellow students that are tuning in, Kendra, the students that you're around with, Aiden, coming up from student body, Katie also doing so much work and research there. What's one challenge or one call to action, one piece of advice that you would have for the students, our next generation of food system leaders? So whoever wants to start with that, I don't know, Ridwan, if you want to, any words to your fellow students.
Yeah, I will start by it, but first I was thinking that I could not do any impact to the society. But no, if you think something is wrong, step up and change that. Like there's no one will say no to you. Like try it. Like be brave enough and step up for yourself and speak up. Then you will get what you need. That's
Thank
my
you. Words of wisdom to go along with Jane Goodall, right? Everybody can make a difference on this. So we'll go in reverse order. Kendra.
I would certainly, recommend kind of starting somewhere, like how Ritwan would have mentioned, like whether it is volunteering, whether it is raising awareness, whether it is like taking classes, wherever that may be. Just start somewhere, pick a book, read something about it, pick an article. I think you can learn a lot from it by getting started somewhere, because sometimes we get bogged down by so much. Food waste is a complex issue, and so we get bogged down by where do I even start from it. But the thing is, making that start is what it takes, and so definitely get started regardless of how trivial you think it may be, because it may not be trivial at all. Just a matter of getting out of your apartment and then going and volunteering, right? Like, so there's a lot of things that can happen. Another thing that I want to say is persevere. In this world of food systems, perseverance is going to be key, because there are going to be people who just don't care. To be told, they don't care much about it, or they don't really know about it, or they are resistant to change, and you have to persevere to really get to it. So just stay strong, but you have a good network of people who are supporting you. There are a lot of communities out there, so reach out, network, and we can all be part of the solution together.
Thank you, Kendra. Thanks for mentioning books. I just say there's 3 good ones here. Commercial interlude. Moderator's prerogative. Aiden.
Yeah, I mean, amazing points that I would second completely. And so the only thing I would add on to it is, number one, I think it's important to recognize that being able to start something like this, like any of the projects that we've talked about, or any of the ones that you might see in the world, it's oftentimes a luxury. I think I was able to have the time to work on FarmLink because I was not supporting a family. I was not having to juggle, 2 jobs or having to pay for my own school, fortunately. And so I think if you are someone who cares about these issues, but you're just like, I can't find the time, it's okay. You don't need to feel, there shouldn't be guilt in that. There's only so much time in the day. That being said, if you are truly motivated and moved by something, I think our one piece of advice is that, find that thing that inspires you, and just find the minimal use case that you can make an impact, and then repeat that impact. I would say, like, ideas get drowned way more often by getting overwhelmed with all the different aspects of all the different things you have to figure out in order to get them, rather than they just fail on their own. So break it down. For us, it was the one truck mindset. We might not be able to move 1 million pounds of food, but we can probably figure out how to get 1 truck to 1 farm. Boil it down to that point, put your blinders on, focus how you make that work. If you can make that work with your schedule and with life going on, then challenge yourself, say, I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to do it again. And you'll be amazed by that momentum that picks up just naturally, and the people that come and follow you and help you. And it allows you, it allows you to have a big impact a little bit at a time.
Excellent. Thank you. It all adds up. Katie, you started us off. Final words.
This might not sound as inspiring as everyone else's, but keep track of the food that is going to waste in your own home. One of the easiest ways to do that is just keep a little notebook. If you have, if you go to the grocery store and have paper receipts, grab a highlighter or a pen and highlight what might be going to waste, and just become aware of what's going to waste in kind of your own food environment, and see what little changes you can make to waste a little bit less. And I'll keep it short since I know we're at time here. And I'll also make a plug to Read Enough by Roger Thoreau.
Yay. Thank you. You're very kind. And yeah, I try to keep track of what's going on in our household. And so that's a good idea. I should have a separate notebook there, that keeps track of that and keeps us on on point with that. So, hey, everybody, thanks for coming. Everybody who participated, thanks for listening in. I'll just say and repeat what I said earlier, that again, no matter what you're studying, whatever your skill set is, whatever your passion is, your inspiration, there's something that you can do to end hunger and malnutrition. Each and every one of you, be imaginative, as we've heard, be creative. There's a way for each of you to make a great contribution. Lead the way and inspire. So please do that. So on that note, thanks all for joining us. So back to Tricia to wrap it up.
I'll give a plug for all 3 books. They're wonderful. No, I want to thank just very quickly our amazing panelists and our amazing moderator. It was a really inspirational session, one of our best. I mean, I think everyone that participated learned a lot. Thank you to our partners. And for those of you who are interested in more great content from Farm Journal Foundation, we have more segments of our speaker series coming up. Next month, we'll be at the World Food Prize, and we'll be participating in events for the COP in November. And we're going to be shifting our focus a little bit with that, looking at agriculture research and focusing in on the nexus between livestock, nutrition, and climate. So it'll be a really great discussion, and hope that all of you will participate. And thank you so much for your time today. Have a great